Perhaps it is time to die.
Hey everyone, it's Bluebear here, and today I'm going to be doing my first non-pre-con video in a while. It was a customer requested order. I have made the deck, and I am going to send it out to them once this video is done. So, they requested an aristocrat deck with Elenda the Dusk Rose as the commander. Here's the caveat here. You're going to notice a couple of things that are a little different than my other videos. I don't have all the cards because they had the cards, so I'm going to just superimpose them digitally as I come across them so that it's kind of no change to anything. But anyway, the request was obviously aristocrats, and if you don't know what aristocrats is, it's basically a way to bleed your opponent dry of health, or all of your opponents if you can, simply by sacrificing creatures or having other creatures on the board die, and then the creatures you do have will start doing damage or draining life from your opponents. So, let's get started. First things first, I do not have Elenda, they did. So, I will read it off and I will superimpose Elenda on here for you. So, she is a 1 black, 1 white, 2 of any, 1/1 vampire knight. She has lifelink, and whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Elenda, and then when Elenda dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. So the theory here is that you're going to make her bigger and bigger, and then eventually sacrifice her to create a whole bunch of tokens, hopefully being a game ender, to the point where it has enough power to drain the entire board with what you have on your board. So, as I always do, I will start with lands. So this budget here was $75 total on my end, and then he had another 75, so the deck came to about 150. So here's what I've got. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see. So all my builds that are requested, I usually throw in some of the stuff I don't put in my pre-cons just because I need to have them for these kind of builds. So, Command Towers first. Tainted Field because we're black-white, and I like these lands a lot when it comes to building decks, budget or otherwise. I actually have these in any deck that I have black in. Scoured Barrens for life gain because life gain in this deck actually matters. Silver Quill Campus for the scrying ability. Orzhov Guildgate. Forsaken Sanctuary, another... it comes into play type just like most of the ones in here, and he will upgrade the lands as he goes. Thriving Moor and Heath. Esper Panorama, so you can get the lands you need, whatever color you're missing. Ignore the island part here. Myriad Landscape. This deck has got more basic lands in it than some others because it's 2 colors, so Myriad Landscape is actually pretty good here. Obscura Storefront. Ignore again the island part. You can go and get one. I like these lands a lot in budget builds, and I'm going to try them out in non-budget builds just because it helps thin your deck out. Ash Barrens for the land cycling. And then Swamps and Plains, and if you want the exact number, I will have the deck list link in the video's description. So it's pretty basic. There's not a whole lot of non-basic lands that help this kind of a deck too much. I mean, there are some, but not really. All right, ramp section. Like I said, when I build a non-budget like pre-con for my customers, I like to throw in the stuff that makes it a little bit better for as cheap as I can. So Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Mind Stone, Talisman of Hierarchy, Orzhov's Signet, and the Commander Sphere, because you might want to be able to draw a card. If you notice, a lot of these are the 2-cast rocks that I always suggest when I do a budget upgrade guide. So that's the ramp section. The meat and potatoes of this deck, and where we're going to start to run the cards that he had, and I'm just going to superimpose. We'll start now. So creatures come in a couple of things. You want creatures that can be recurred from the graveyard, hopefully by themselves. You want the aristocrat-style creatures, and then you want some fun stuff. So Clay Revenant is a newer one from Brothers War. It can return itself. It's got a twin in here. So these 2 cards are almost identical, except for one is 1 and one is 1 black. Persistent Specimen. It returns itself. Conscript, another newer card from Dominaria United. Oathsworn Vampire, because you will be gaining a lot of life. Aristocrat decks do like to gain life a lot because that's just the nature of their thing, so he'll come into play a bunch of times. Reassembling Skeleton, again, returns from the grave. There are some Soul Sister style cards in here because you're going to be recasting or bringing things back from your grave to the battlefield, creatures-wise, so you want to gain as much life as you can because you're going to need that life later. So Lunarch Veteran, who also turns into Luminous Phantom, and no matter which side it's on, you'll be able to gain life whenever you have a creature enter the battlefield. Soul Warden, Impassioned Orator. Suture Priest is an interesting one because you gain life and then your opponents can lose life, which is always a benefit. The first card that I don't have, or they had, I have it, they had, is Blood Artist. Blood Artist is a 2-cast 0/1 that whenever it or another creature dies, any creature, not just yours, it could be your opponent's too, that player loses life and you gain a life. That's the first aristocrat creature. Alright. Bloodseeker, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose a life. So if you're facing a token-making deck, something like a Scoot Swarm-style deck, they may not want to create the tokens. Zolaport Cutthroat, one of the better options as far as an aristocrat creature goes, because it's each opponent. So whenever Zolaport Cutthroat or another creature dies, doesn't matter whose side of the board it's on, each opponent, and that's important, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Falcon Wrath Noble, another aristocrat creature. Cruel Celebrant, this one isn't each opponent loses life and you gain a life as well. Corpse Knight, Pious Evangel, who flips. So he starts out as a Soul Sister, and then you can sacrifice a creature, which is good because you need to sacrifice outlets all the time anyway. And then he turns into an Aristocrat instead of a Soul Sister. So whenever it or another creature you control dies, an opponent loses a life and you gain a life. All right. The newest addition to the Aristocrat family that may as well just be the commander sometimes, because you can actually swap out Elenda for Ellis Ill. It's a 2 to cast 2/2 with Death Touch, and then whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, you gain a life, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses life. So this is a really good one. Marauding Blight Priest. So the other half of this deck, where it's going to be an Aristocrat style, is whenever you gain life, each opponent will lose a life. And that's important because there's a lot of life gain here, so you're going to do sacrificing creatures, you're going to make an opponent lose a life, you gain a life, and then things like Marauding Blight Priest, and then Epic Cure of Blood is the other one. Whenever you gain a life, it's each instance, and not for each life you gain. It's whenever you gain life in general. Each opponent will lose a life. So that's the style of this deck. That's what Aristocrats does. Morbid Opportunist is for fun. So whenever one or more creatures you die, doesn't matter whose side it's on, you can draw a card. So card draw is key here. You're going to want to fill your hand up. Pawn of Ulamog. So whenever it or another non-token creature you control dies, you get another token to sacrifice. You can either use it to add mana, which is a little bit of ramp, or you can use it for any other reason. I have a bunch of them in here. Regal Bloodlord. So you're going to gain life almost every turn. So getting a 1/1 flyer, which is very helpful because flying is kind of a bane for this deck. So flying creatures coming in, you want to have as much life as you can and not worry about your life total. Ruthless Knave. So you sacrifice a creature, so it's a sack outlet, and create 2 treasure tokens. Ramp, 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 and then you can sacrifice 3 treasures to draw a card, which is really nice. Pilgrim of the Ages is a pet card of mine when I do decks for people. I like this because you can get it back. The ability to go get a Plains and put it into your hand is nice because then you can thin your deck out of draws of land later. Another card that he had that I'm going to superimpose is Taste of Karlov. It's a 4 to cast 2/4 Human Advisor that basically adds additional triggers whenever a creature dies. So now when a creature dies, if you have one creature out that's an Aristocrat style, they'll now lose 2 life. Then if you have something like a Marauding Blight Priest, now you're going to have 4 triggers on the board. That's where this deck really synergizes well. A lot of triggers. Then, It That Betrays. He had it, and he wanted to know if I wanted to put it in there, and I said, of course I want to put it in there. This card is good. It is 12 to cast, which is but you have a lot of ways to ramp in here. It's an 11/11 with Annihilator 2. And then, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, you may put that card onto the battlefield under your control. And it's not really may, you just put that card under your control. And there's another card in here that'll do something similar. So the synergy there is really, really nice because he provides the making your opponent sacrifice. There are other ones that I could have put in here. I originally started with creatures that do that, but I changed it out because I wanted more life gain and more life drain. So next section, we're going to start doing spells, and this is going to be utility in different ways. We're going to do, removal first, card draw, then we're going to go into other things. So as far as the removal goes, Feed the Swarm is one of the very few ways in black to remove an enchantment, and even though you have to sacrifice a couple life points, it really shouldn't matter because this deck wants to gain life. Path to Exile, one of the best removal spells for Commander, same thing with Swords to Plowshares. I wanted to make this deck really hit and really be able to remove what they need to remove. Crib Swap is another one. This one exiles a creature, just like these two do, but they get a 1/1 in return, which isn't always a bad thing because if you can make them sacrifice it, you can benefit from it. Darksteel Mutation. I put this in every white deck that I make for somebody if the budget fits it because it locks a commander down. Making it indestructible means that they have to have a sacrifice outlet to be able to get rid of an 0/1 insect that was their commander at one point. Oubliette is another one that's similar to Darksteel Mutation. This one phases a commander out. It actually phases any creature, but you're really going to target a commander usually. And the thing about this is they can't do anything about it unless they can get rid of the enchantment. So if you're playing against somebody who's solely in black or maybe in black-blue because they don't have a lot of enchantment removal, you're pretty golden on keeping their commander out forever. Disenchant, again, more enchantment removal. It's artifact and enchantment removal. Fracture is artifact, enchantment, and planeswalker removal. Mortify is creature and enchantment removal. I needed enchantment removal because a lot of devastating things are enchantments in Commander. And then Generous Gift because it's a permanent, so it doesn't even matter if it's land, because you sometimes need land destruction, you never know. They get a 3/3 back again, not that big of a deal, just because you might want them to have creatures. You might be facing a deck that's creatureless, and you might want them to have to sacrifice it. Card draw was very light and simple. Sign in Blood, Read the Bones, and Foreboding Fruit. All of them, Sign in Blood doesn't have too much of an advantage other than it's cheap. Read the Bones lets you scry first so you can make your draws better, and then this gives you something that makes you, or helps you gain life. So, and that goes well with the Marauding Blight Priest and the other one that does that. Next up, we're going to have some sacrifice outlets. He had Altar of Dementia. Altar of Dementia, not as prominent in this deck just because you're not going to mill somebody out, but it's a free sack outlet, so it's always nice. Ashnod's Altar is the more important one. Ashnod's Altar lets you sacrifice something to add 2 colorless to your mana pool, which can be good because you have things like It That Betrays that cost 11, and you may be able to gain benefit of sacrificing those creatures anyway, and then gaining 2 mana. Enough of them, you can get It That Betrays out for free. Vampiric Rites, it's another sack outlet. It lets you gain life and draw a card. Same thing, which is Cauldron. The difference between them is the Cauldron taps, and the Vampiric Rites does not. Now, the reason why they're both in here is redundancy. And then something I like to add, one of my favorite cards that came out of Zendikar Rising was Relic Vial, especially for Aristocrats decks, because most Aristocrat decks play Clerics. So it's a sack outlet that lets you draw a card, and then it says if you control a Cleric, which you most likely will, it's an Aristocrat card. So each player will lose a life and you'll gain a life. So I really like this card. It's one of my favorite ones, especially for budget building. Next, we'll have things that benefit you when creatures die. Ghoulish Procession gives you a token, and that's always important in a deck that likes that ability. Remember, Taste of Karloff also gives creatures, token creatures lifelink, so you'll gain life with that too. Bastion of Remembrance is another aristocrat-style creature. It's an aristocrat-style enchantment in general. So it gives you a token, which you always will need. And then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. Dictate of Erebos benefits when creatures you control die. It also fits very well with It That Betrays. So whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent must sacrifice a creature. Very synergistic here. Same thing with Black Market. Black Market says whenever any creature dies, you put a counter on it. And then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you can add a black to your mana pool for each charge counter on it. So again, creatures dying, counters going on it, it gives you ramp, helps you cast all those things you want to cast. It also helps you use abilities of things that cost mana if you need. And then the last one on this section is Grave Betrayal. So whenever a creature you don't control dies, which is an interesting way of wording things, because most of the things have if a creature you control dies, but this one says if a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step, and that creature is now a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So, excuse me, the benefits here, and you can start to see how this synergizes, the whole deck does. And the last section, again, more stuff I'm going to have to superimpose. Phyrexian Reclamation. So this is a way to get stuff back from your grave to your hand so you can cast them if they're creatures that don't have the ability to return themselves. I put as many as I could in here, but not all of them do. And you want to get your aristocrat-style stuff back. So you can pay 2 and then 2 life and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand, and that's it. You don't have to discard a card, which is very beneficial here. I have the 2 monuments, Bontus and Oketras. They reduce costs of creature spells for each color. So Bontus does black creature spells, and Oketras does white. They reduce the cost by 1, and then Bontu's Monument says whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses life and you gain a life, which fits the theme very well. And then Oketras let you create a 1/1 token, which, as you can tell, this deck is all about creating tokens. Protecting your commander is pretty important, so Swiftfoot Boots. And then, I say this all the time, Helm of the Host is probably one of the best cards for commander ever. Having more Elendas out, or more Tastes, or whatever you need, is more gooder. Final Parting, I like this in this deck. So tutors are expensive. They always have been, they always will be, because it's a very essential part of the game. Final Parting is a cheaper one that does something beneficial for you with this deck because you can recur things. So, it lets you search your library for 2 cards, put one into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Remember, you have creatures that come back from the grave on their own. So, you go grab one of them as the second card and then grab any card you want to keep in your hand, and there you have it. And the last card of the deck was one that they didn't realize that they had told me that they wanted to put in here, and I said it's actually a really good card for this deck. Lolth, Spider Queen. 5 to cast, Planeswalker with 4 loyalty when it comes into play. It says whenever a creature you control dies, you put a loyalty counter on Lolth. There's a lot of death going on in this, and in this deck in general, it's just all about death triggers and enters the battlefield triggers. So having a when something dies ability on a Planeswalker to give it loyalty counters is a bonus. It has a 0 cost loyalty ability of drawing a card and losing a life, which is absolutely wonderful in a deck that likes to gain life, and has very limited access to card draw, so it's a very good option. The down tick is to create 2/1 black spider creature tokens with menace and reach. Helps you kind of stave off some of that flying issue that you have. And it creates the tokens that you want to sacrifice if you need to anyway. Its ultimate is a little different. I'm not sure how well the ultimate will work in this deck. It seems like it might be okay, though. So for -8, you get an emblem with whenever an opponent is dealt combat damage by 1 or more creatures you control. If that player lost less than 8 life, it deals they lose life equal to the difference. So if you dealt 5 combat damage to them, the emblem will make them lose another 3 life. So, and that's basically the deck in a nutshell. It's actually one of the decks that I plan on making, not with Elenda. I think I'm going to make it my own version with Ellis Eel, but I am going to make a version of this deck which isn't as budgeted as this is for myself for my 32 deck challenge, but it's a great deck. I love aristocrat style decks. They really do hit the spot for me as far as, you know, I did the Mishra's Burnished Banner deck last week, and I told you I like the sacrificing things for benefit. This is all this is all the deck does. So that's the deck I have for you this week. I'm hoping that this deck is actually going to one of the budget commander group mods. Derek, thank you for the purchase. I've done a couple decks for Derek over the last, year or so since I became a mod there, and he seems to like the decks that I make, so that's why he comes to me. And I'm glad I could do this. I've been wanting to do an Aristocrats deck video for a while now, and here you go. So hopefully you enjoyed it. That's all I got for you this week. Next week I'll be doing some little 60-card budget Battle Brew decks that I'll be bringing with me to the convention. It's in South Jersey. It's called South Jersey Geek Fest. If you're in the area, probably not, but if you are, I highly recommend it. So thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or concerns, or you just want to talk or chat about any of the videos I put out, you can do so using any of the methods I have displayed here. Additionally, if you would like to support the channel, you can do so in 3 ways. Donations are accepted and greatly appreciated. I have 3 methods with which you can do so displayed on the screen, and keep in mind that no amount is too small. If donations aren't your thing, and you would like to get something for your money, that's great too. I sell a lot of the decks I present on the channel, as well as mystery packs. So, if you're interested in any of these, you can contact me using the information I have up on your screen right now. Directly contacting me is usually the best and cheapest way to do so, but you can always look at what I currently have available on the Facebook Marketplace. And lastly, if you want to show your love and support for the channel, but like myself, are a little strapped for cash, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, watch some videos and give them a like, and possibly share them out on your social medias you use to help spread my content to more people. No matter what way you choose is greatly appreciated and will help support the channel, and I thank you for it. Sadly, that is all the time I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and please, stick around and watch some of the many great videos I've posted over the last few years, and remember to check back again for new content I'll be posting every week. Have a great day.